WeatherBrains on the air, ladies and gentlemen. 434 is the episode number, the pre-show, and I am late. This is the most tardy I've ever been. It's like
you missed slot, James.
We're starting the pre-show for. You know it's bad when the pre-show begins 4 minutes after the regular show should be starting here. So this is not good.
For shame.
Yes. We are here, and I have really got to get my act together. And let's see. I know we've got to bring in one more. I think everybody else is here. Brian is absent. Is Brian here?
Yeah, Brian is driving home, James, from the NWA meet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Bill, it sounds like you're on your laptop mic. It sounds very hollow for some reason. Hit it really hard. I guess that's it.
Testing. 1, 2,
Oh,
3.
that's better.
It's a little better.
Turn the gain up a little bit. I turned it way down since she said I was clipped. How about now? Testing. 1, 2, 3.
That's better.
Testing. Testing. How about that?
That's too hot. A little too hot.
How about now? How about now? Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Still too hot.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
That's better. I'll leave it right there.
Right. I've got Dr. John Knox here too. He won't be on camera, but
okay.
Mike, and then Chris Landsea will be on my mic also.
You're gonna get all the FaceTime tonight.
That's scary. I'll say hello to Dr. John Knox. Let's get John some sound here.
Let's see here.
Oh, here it is. I'm going to go ahead and call Chris Landsea so that he doesn't think we forgot him. Can y'all hear the one ringy?
We did.
Yeah, the greatest concern is if Bill's bandwidth dies, then we're hosed because he's got so much coming off his channel. We are done.
I've got 35 gigs down. Chris?
Hi, this is Chris.
This is Bill and the gang at WeatherBrains. We're about ready to start.
Okay, sure. It's a little hard to hear you. Can you speak up?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Not really. Not very well.
How about now?
Let me turn up the volume here.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll help.
How about now?
Yeah, I can hear you a little better now.
Okay, you sound really good on this end, James. Do you hear?
The problem is you are way too hot for us now. You are hotter than a firecracker.
Okay, well, I can hear you real well now. I'll turn down my volume.
No, I'm talking about Bill. I'm sorry, Chris. It's Bill coming back to the show here.
Oh, okay.
The phone audio is fine.
All right. How about now, Chris? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay, but you're a little soft-spoken.
All right, James, how about now for you?
You are good for me.
Okay. I'm going to try to keep a happy medium here.
Okay.
Yeah, the unfortunate problem, we have to keep the levels right for the audio portion, which is how most people listen. But we're missing Brian, who will be with us shortly. And I think Alex just joined us. Alex, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Well,
Hey,
good.
Alex.
Let's get this thing started. We're going to start 8 minutes late. This is actually on time for us. All right. Standing by. Get the recorders going. We are on cable television. Welcome to our cable audience. Sorry we're a few minutes late this evening. All my fault. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
WeatherBrains!
WeatherBrains episode number 434 for the 19th of May. I mean, we can almost touch Memorial Day weekend and the beginning of meteorological summer. Boy, is this year flying along. I'm James Spann. Thank you for joining us, and we are delighted that you are here. For those that are watching and listening live, had a little late start this evening. Actually, a lot of things were happening. We had a local National Weather Association meeting in our market, and I had a little baseball event for our son I had to attend, but I think we are all here. We are gathered together, and Aubrey Urbanowitz probably has the most common sense of anybody on this show, so let's bring her in. Aubrey, welcome. Thank you for your common sense.
Well, thank you for acknowledging that, James.
It doesn't take much to figure that out. So which edit bay are you in this evening?
I'm back to the usual edit 4.
Edit 4. Fantastics. Yep. Aubrey is in the lovely Harrisonburg, Virginia. Mm-hmm. And come August, when it's about 99 here, the heat index is 115, we're coming to see you because it's always cooler in the lovely Shenandoah Valley.
You know, it's a perfect time because I'm getting married in August, and then you all can come in and have fun at the wedding.
You know, again, I do sing at weddings, and if you would like to just consider that, Nate is my backup singer, and we sing great classics like classics too. We've only just begun. White Lace and Promises, A Kiss for Luck, and we're on our way.
I'm sure we could come up with some sort of a playlist for you guys.
What's so sad, I'm the only guy old enough to remember that song here in this group. That was by the Carpenters in 1972. But anyway, Aubrey, she's getting hitched, and that's the big news. You're breaking all these hearts, but and your fiance is going to come on this show at some point, right? Yep,
just have to invite him.
Okay, cool. That'll be a great. We had a fun summer show. We just have a little bit of fun here. Nate Johnson is at WRAL Television in Raleigh, North Carolina. So, Professor, have you graduated your class yet? Are they done?
Well, I didn't teach in the spring. That's the beauty of my little gig. I only teach one class in one semester, and that's in the fall. So
really,
but I had a number of my students just graduated the past weekend, the weekend before last, Mother's Day weekend, and I already had a couple of them placed in jobs, including one in a top 100 market. So I'm really proud of him and expect great things from others.
Very nice. So Nate, if anybody wants to take your class, how do they do that?
Move to Raleigh. That's your that's your first bit. No, it's a hands-on class. So you sort of have to be here, but beyond that, it's a Monday night class, and then we have a lab Monday night or Tuesday night, depending on what lab group you get assigned to. But it's just a class you sign up for as a student at NC State. Actually, awesome. I think I'm going to have a Carolina student in the class, Carolina student and a Meredith College student in the class this year. So we're branching out.
Very nice. Hey, Rick Smith is now a regular on this
Sucker!
show.
Oh, wait, sorry, welcome.
We ruined many a good career on this show. We send a lot of good careers right down the tube, so welcome.
Well, I'm glad to be here, I think. Hopefully this goes well. I'm honored to be a member of the team, and we'll contribute any way we can here.
For those that don't know, Rick is the warning coordination meteorologist at the National Weather Service in Norman, Oklahoma, one of the finest operations in the country, and he is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful expert not only at the physical science of meteorology, but also communicating what we know. And he has led the way with his work out there, and he's been on the show many times as a guest, and it's great to have him. So between Rick and Aubrey, we actually have some classiness here. Sorry, Nate and Bill.
I don't know.
I'm not the newest one anymore.
Exactly. You're now an old pro. So let's go to Bill Murray. And Bill is live at a local honky-tonk. Hooters. Bill, where are you?
It's the tilted kilt, actually, but anyway.
Tilted kilt. Great.
Yeah, James, we got some great guests tonight. You're going to feel like you're hearing voices out of my picture. Dr. John Knox was our speaker tonight at the local NWA chapter meeting. He spoke on his great research on the tornado debris from the April 27, 2011 tornadoes. John, it's nice to have you with us again. I think this is your 4th appearance on the show.
I think that's right, Bill. Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to speak to the Central Alabama NWA.
Well, it's great to have you here, and thank you for sticking around to be a panelist tonight. We're really excited about that. And we've got a very special guest panelist tonight. He's a junior at Plymouth State University in Plymouth, New Hampshire. He majors in meteorology. He was a student meteorology for the local studio or public access channel this past semester. He's very active in the school and serves as the president of the AMS chapter. He's the student body representative to the faculty, the student body president, and the student body or the senior class president. So hail to the chief, Alex Herbst.
Well, thank you for welcoming me in, Bill.
First, we want to hear from you real quick, Alex, before we get to our guest weather brain. Hail from New Jersey. So, what got you into weather?
Well, I would say it would probably be back when I was in second grade. I sat home from school sick one day, and I was watching the Weather Channel, and I just immediately got hooked. And back in '99, which really wasn't that long ago, we experienced Hurricane Floyd here, and that was really a big thing for me as a young kid, being able to experience that, and now I'm just hooked.
So your family was probably affected by Hurricane Sandy in some way, being from New Jersey. So talk about how that factors into your future plans for research.
Well, it definitely factors into my future plans. I'm not right on the coastline here in New Jersey, but we're about an hour from the coast, and my family was without power for a good week after Sandy, and they felt the immediate impacts of that, obviously. But I'm working with Dr. Lourdes Aviles at Plymouth State on doing research in the future about warning systems and the societal impacts of storms like Sandy and how we can better prepare people for the future with that.
Well, we're really excited to have you on the show tonight, and we've got a real treat for you in terms of the guest weather brain. So jump in and be a part of the show at any point tonight, and we're excited to have you with us.
Thanks, Bill. I'm looking forward to it.
Now, tonight's guest weather brain is no stranger to anyone who follows tropical meteorology. He's been a research meteorologist with the Hurricane Research Division of the AOML at NOAA. He is now the Science and Operations Officer at the National Hurricane Center. Dr. Chris Landsea, thanks for joining us tonight.
Well, thanks. Let me see if I got everybody right. Aubrey, Nate, Bill, Rick, John, and Alex. Did I get everybody correct?
Wow.
Yep.
Impressive.
That may qualify you to be a permanent panelist, Chris.
Well, I figured I better take notes tonight here.
Well, that's impressive. But, Chris, it's hard for me to imagine Hope and Charlie Neumann walking around with this database in cards in 1968. We know it is HERDAT today. Talk about that database and how it evolved.
Yeah, well, back in the late 60s, kind of the advent of the computer era, an idea came about of let's develop a computer model to develop analogs. That is, if you know where a storm is now and where it's been, let's look at the historical database to make a 3-day track forecast of where it may go using an objective technique. So to do that, they had to have a digitized database, and they put together one, and the original HERDAT format's 80 characters, and that actually survived up until just a year and a half ago. And it contains the positions and peak winds and central pressures back over a century. And yeah, John Hope and Charlie Neumann, when they were both at the Hurricane Center in the late 60s, along with a whole bunch of college students, helped digitize all the hand-drawn track maps going all the way back to 1886. So that was the kind of advent of the current database that we use today.
So talk about how you can access that database now, and what are some of the creative uses that you see being done with it right now?
Well, one improvement that we made to the database was to include in some more parameters. So, for example, the original HERDAT didn't have any non-developing depressions. So systems that reached a tropical depression stage but didn't go any further were being left out, and that was kind of an unfortunate omission that we wanted to correct. Another thing was we wanted to include in landfall information. Because the HERDAT had positions and winds every 6 hours, unless a storm actually made landfall right at 0, 6, 12, or 18Z, that information was lost. And lastly, we wanted to include size information, that is the radius of tropical storm 50 knot and hurricane force winds. Since we've been best tracking that is post-storm analyzing those features since 2004. So we came up with a new version about a year and a half ago, and it includes all that additional information. So this hurricane database is not just used by meteorologists, but it is used extensively, for example, to validate predictions from either track models or intensity models, as well as official forecasts. But it's also used to look at long-term trends. Are we seeing increases in the numbers or intensities of hurricanes? Are we seeing cycles of hurricanes? But it's also used outside meteorology. For example, in the building industry, what's the appropriate building code for various places along the coast depend critically upon this database. And finally, the insurance industry uses it because they want to accurately charge people what is the actuarially sound rate. And to start with, you need to know how often do you get damaging hurricanes hitting the coast. So all of this really evolves around this key hurricane database that we're trying to fix up as best we can.
So if you have a project out there that you think could use this data, how does a developer or a meteorologist go about accessing it and using it?
Oh, sure. You just Google hurricane reanalysis. It'll be the first thing that pops up. We have the database available on the Hurricane Center website under Data Archives, and it's also under the Hurricane Research Division website as well. It's a simple ASCII format, but it's comma delimited and space delimited, so somebody can plop it into an Excel spreadsheet and immediately be able to do research with the data itself. Also, there's a really nice website that the NOAA Coastal Service Center developed a couple years ago that accesses this HURDAT database and allows you to plot up different aspects of the hurricane seasons stratified by years or month or geographic areas. So there's a couple different ways one can get a hold of the data set.
Now, Chris, you mentioned the word reanalysis, and your name is sort of synonymous with that. So where did the idea come from to start going back and looking at old storms, and how did that evolve?
Well, it was about the year 2000, and at that point, Charlie Newman, who, though was retired from federal service, was still active in doing research. He had gotten a little bit of funding from the NOAA Climate Program Office to start the reassessment of the hurricane database. Partly it's needed because the way we view hurricanes now is very different from 50 years ago or 100 years ago or 150 years ago. And so you want to kind of reassess all of the data with how we understand hurricanes now. Secondly, there's a lot of random and systematic errors in there. So, for example, one systematic error was that before the year 1960, they didn't even understand pressure-wind relationships. So you get some really bizarre combinations like, 120 mile per hour winds with 990 millibars or 930 millibars with 65 mile per hour winds, stuff that's just not physically possible. And so we wanted to also go back and see if we can discover storms that occurred that didn't get into the database originally. Out over the open ocean, it's a big ocean out there, and before satellite era, it was fairly easy for a storm to occur, even a hurricane, if it wasn't in the middle of the shipping lanes, and for it to be missed or under-characterized of how strong it was. So Charlie set out in the late 90s to reanalyze the database, but then he started getting a bit ill and was going to have to give the money back. But he knew that I was interested in climate changes of hurricanes, so he asked me to get involved with the project. It's about 15 years now, and we're about 2/3 to 3/4 done on the project, and a couple more years to go, I think.
Well, one of the biggest stories that came out was the change of the category of Hurricane Andrew. Talk about that for a moment, how important that was, and sort of how groundbreaking that was for you to be a part of that.
Yeah, Hurricane Andrew is a great example of a reanalysis based on our changing understanding of hurricanes. In 1997, we had the first drop zones launched into the eye wall of a hurricane, as led by the folks at the Hurricane Research Division. And they soon realized that strong winds made it down to the ocean pretty effectively, more so than had been understood previously. And indeed, there's a kind of a rule of thumb called the 90% rule, where you take the winds at 700 millibars during a hurricane hunter mission, about 10,000 feet up, and you multiply by 0.9, and you get what the rough surface winds are. And so that understanding evolved and became used at the Hurricane Center around the year 2000, 2001. And then at that point, the 10-year anniversary of Hurricane Andrew was coming up in 2002, and Max Mayfield had asked myself and a couple other folks to reassess Andrew in time for the 10-year anniversary. So based on the current methodology at the Hurricane Center, as well as a very nice paper by James Franklin, Mike Black, and Crystal Valdez that documented this 90% rule and how to apply it, we were able to come up fairly confidently that Andrew was a Category 5 at landfall, and not kind of borderline. It was well above the 155 mile per hour threshold, as best we could tell.
So this year, of course, was the announcement of the reanalysis of Camille, and that was also fairly dramatic. Talk about that, Chris.
Well, some similarities there. We were getting pinged on over the last couple of years of, well, give us a list of the strongest U.S. hurricanes and rank them. And it was problematic to do that because we had reanalyzed Hurricane Andrew. We had reanalyzed the 1935 Labor Day hurricane that hit the Keys. We reanalyzed the 1928 San Felipe hurricane that hit Puerto Rico. But we had not reassessed Camille. And because of that, we couldn't really do an apples-to-apples comparison on how strong Camille was versus the other ones. In the raw data set, Camille was by far the strongest, but there were suspicions that the winds in the existing database might be too strong. So about a year ago, Deputy Director of the Hurricane Center at Rappaport asked us to expedite Camille, and we were able to have that done in time for the AMS, American Meteorological Society's Hurricanes and Tropical Meteorology Conference last month out in San Diego.
So that storm fascinates me because it's one of the first ones that I remember, Chris, and what Dr. Simpson and the forecasters were going through without good recon data that weekend, and without really effective satellites, always fascinates me. Talk about what you learned about that storm anecdotally, if there's anything that you can share with us that maybe we haven't heard out in the popular literature before.
Yeah, well, one thing that was fascinating was that even though they had aircraft reconnaissance out there, their ability to measure the winds was very limited. They did not have accurate flight level winds. And for measuring the surface winds, they basically were looking out the window and saying, oh, that looks like a lot of wind, and making an estimate of how strong the winds were, just from visual look there. And so what we had to rely upon, and that this has been true in the 40s and 50s that we've done so far, is take the central pressure measurement and then using a pressure-wind relationship to back up the max sustained winds, taking into account other factors such as the size of the storm, environmental pressure in which it's embedded, and also the speed of the storm. So we keep the Category 5, but we put the winds down some from 109 mile per hour sustained wind down to 175. So I think that was a surprise of how bad back then they were able to measure the winds in hurricanes. It was still very much a guessing game back in 1969.
Did you ever feel, Chris, that the forecasters at the Hurricane Center on that Sunday were kind of happy to believe that it was 190 so that they might could get that little extra bit of impetus in the forecasts on that Sunday afternoon?
Well, we did get a hold of the surviving forecasters from 1969, Neil Frank and Bob Simpson and Gil Clark and Joe Pellicer, because we were trying to get a good answer about what the lowest pressure was. And in the published write-up in the Monthly Weather View, it was a little ambiguous about what was measured when. And unfortunately, the memories from those folks from, 45 years ago had faded a little bit. And what they did tell us, especially Joe Pellicer and Gil Clark's son, James Clark, what they relayed to us didn't match the actual facts that we knew for sure. And, maybe that's not surprising that after 45 years their memory had faded. But I think all of them were convinced it was a Category 5, but knowing exactly how high on the scale it actually was, I think all of them realized that the 190 miles per hour was a big guess back in 1969.
So, Chris, you're about to reach the end of the internet with Atlantic hurricanes. Any plans for a Pacific reanalysis, or is there a need for that?
Well, today my student Sandy Delgado and I were finishing up the 1963 first draft of the reanalysis, and I just had got word I have received 3 more years of funding through the NOAA Climate Program Office to finish it up. And the plan is to go up to about the year 2000, because that's when this 90% rule that I mentioned came into effect. And so after 2000, things should be fairly homogeneous. But I'm guessing that I may move on to other aspects of hurricane forecasting and science. I've been working on this for over 12 years, and it's been a lot of fun. But I think it's about time, if I can, to close the book and move on to something else.
Very cool. Well, you've been very vocal about the inappropriate use of the data set in terms of different studies on hurricane frequency. Does the reanalysis address some of that, or can you share a little bit about your opinions on that?
Yeah, well, it has been perturbing to me that some folks would use the hurricane database and blindly turn a crank and get an answer about, for example, trends in hurricanes, that we're having more hurricanes compared to 150 years ago, without taking into account how technology affects the database. This database is probably one of the worst for describing long-term trends, because our technological fingerprints are all over this in how we count storms and how we assess how strong they are. But there has been, I think, some very innovative work to try to estimate what is missed, because we're never going to have a perfect database, and one has to come to grips with what did you not measure. For example, in the 1950s, you had aircraft reconnaissance. The hurricane hunters for the Air Force and the Navy were out there, but they only covered about 1/2 of the Atlantic Ocean. So you still had a half that was virtually unmonitored. So fortunately, there's been work by the folks at the Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Lab up at Princeton to estimate how many storms were missed, how many hurricanes were missed, year by year, going back to the late 1800s. And I think that has allowed us to get a better handle on what are the types, and do we see cycles of activity in a much more realistic fashion. I am planning to work with Kate Betchy, who's one of the key researchers up there, to apply the same methodology to major hurricanes. How many Category 3s and 4s and 5s did we miss before the satellite era? And I think that's a key question that we'd like to see if we can get an answer to within the next couple of years.
But Chris, a frequent question in the media is, how will climate change affect hurricanes? What are some of the certainties and from your professional standpoint. That was the climate change buzzer. Anytime I climate change, I get buzzed, Chris. So maybe the host got a special dispensation here.
I got it. Well, yeah, when it comes to hurricanes and climate change, I think there are a few things we can count on. One of which is that even though the sea surface temperatures may warm up a lot, let's say that there's a substantial global warming and we see the water temps warm by 2 degrees Celsius, 4 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century. That'd be a lot. That's kind of at the high end for the tropics. Because the response in the atmosphere is so quick, you don't end up having a lot more heat or convective available potential energy. The total moisture goes up a little bit, but the atmosphere stays pretty close to the moist adiabat. So I think that's one thing that we can count on is that we're not going to see a big change, for example, in the threshold for storms to form. We're not going to start seeing hurricanes form near Iceland, for example. And steering patterns aren't going to change drastically. If anything, the work done by the folks at University of Miami, Angela Colbert and her PhD work suggests that we may actually see more recurvers that stay out over the open ocean than present day because of climate change. But in general, most of the climate change and hurricane effects are pretty small. Small change in intensity, perhaps a moderate decrease in the numbers, and a small increase in the storm surge. So, in my view, and this is my view only, not an agency perspective, hurricanes really shouldn't be portrayed as the poster child for global warming. There's other issues that I think are more problematic, but when you look at the actual science behind what's projected from hurricanes and global warming, it's really, to me, not very scary. What's much worse are these large decade-to-decade swings, huge amplitude, and also that our vulnerability as a population, both in the U.S. and in the Caribbean, keeps getting much worse because there's so many people living right along the coastline that could go underwater when the next hurricane comes.
And you mentioned storm surge obviously is a potential problem, and in the current edition of BAMS, there's an article about looking back 50 years instead of 30 and saying that storm surge still is the big killer. Chris, talk about how the Hurricane Center is addressing that with new products over the next couple of years.
Yeah, the paper that you mentioned was by Ed Rappaport, our deputy director, and he looked back at the last 50 years of fatalities in the United States due to tropical storms and hurricanes. And what he found, perhaps not surprising to most in the field, is that water is the biggest killer. That storm surge kills half the people in the United States when a hurricane comes ashore. But also you get freshwater flooding, either flash floods or mudslides, killing another 75%, and another 25%, and another 10% would be either ships that go down at or folks in the surf zone. So it's well over 80% of the fatalities from tropical storms or hurricanes are related to water, not wind, not tornadoes. So that's something that we're trying to emphasize more at the National Hurricane Center to get the population better prepared for when a hurricane comes ashore and pushes that deadly wall of water that we call storm surge. One of the new products that we're going to debut this year is called an inundation graphic. That is a depiction for each hurricane or storm that threatens the U.S. It'll be updated every 6 hours, and it's going to show the areas that could go underwater and by how much. And so it's going to go down to kind of zip code or city scale to let folks know what areas are most at risk for going underwater. Now it's going to be overrepresenting what actually occurs, because storm surge really depends on the exact track a hurricane takes. So because we don't have a perfect knowledge of the track, we have to tell more people than actually get impacted. So to me, that's an exciting new graphic to be able to provide to folks, because I think it makes a stronger case when local emergency managers to say evacuate, and here's a big piece of evidence to say why, because your house might go underwater.
Now, Chris, you worked with Dr. Gray and as a graduate student, and when Nate and Brian and I were in Corpus or in Padre this year with the Tropical Conference with a lot of folks, of course, Dr. Gray and Dr. Klotzbach's forecasts get a lot of attention. Talk about those. I walked away from that conference thinking that, there's a lot more meat behind these than the media really gives them credit. Talk about that process and how it's evolved over the years and what you think about it.
Yeah, well, Dr. Gray pioneered the seasonal hurricane forecast back in 1984, and for 30 years now, he's demonstrated that there is skill that is available in making these predictions. The skill is best at the start of the active part of the season in early August, and it becomes less as you try to make a longer lead forecast. And by the time you get to a December outlook, there's really not a lot of skill that's been demonstrated in the actual forecast issued 6 months in advance. And I think the one aspect that the general public doesn't quite get is that the forecast doesn't talk about specifics for landfall. So if you're living, say, for example, in Houston, Texas, and you hear a seasonal forecast that it's going to be busy, I think a lot of the general public thinks, oh, it's going to be busy for Houston, and that's just not true. What happens at your city for hurricane season has almost no bearing on how active it is overall, because for any location to get struck by a hurricane, it's a very, very rare event. Even the place that gets hit the most, Southeast Florida, we only average a hurricane once every 5 years. And so it's, whether it's a busy year that's forecast or a quiet year, people have to prepare the same way. So I think that kind of distinction gets lost in a lot of folks on really what these seasonal forecasts mean.
And there was one other article in BAMS this month that caught my attention, and that's Mark DiMaria's lead author article that talks about really the tropical cyclone intensity model guidance is getting better faster than we're led to believe generally. What's your comment on that, Chris?
Yeah, wow, I'm real impressed. You all are on the very latest papers that have just gotten published. Yeah, Mark DiMaria was a NESDIS employee in Fort Collins, Colorado for many years, and just a few months ago he moved to Miami, and he's now my supervisor. He's head of the technology and science branch at the Center. And so I'm real excited in helping us out. Primarily with statistical methodology. And what that very nicely shows is that even though the actual forecasts from the Hurricane Center on intensity, the peak winds, they've only gotten a little better over time. But it turns out that the guidance, both in statistical models and in dynamical models, have gotten quite a bit better over the last 20, 30 years. But the forecasters were just so much better than the tools. Now, finally, the statistical hurricane intensity prediction system, the growth equation model, the fluid dynamics lab, dynamical model, as well as the relatively new hurricane weather research forecast model. So all these tools are helping to provide a more objective prediction for us to weigh more on when we're making our 5-day predictions for tropical storm intensity.
It must be a really exciting time to be the Sioux at the National Hurricane Center, Chris.
Well, it's fun working down in Miami at the Hurricane Center. I really enjoy the variety of job duties that I get to be involved with. So in the last several months, because we've been short-staffed in the marine, our tropical analysis branch, I'm doing a lot more surface analysis for the Western Hemisphere, marine forecasting for either the Atlantic or the Pacific Ocean. So I've learned quite a bit in the last few months on the marine side of things. As of 15 May, we started hurricane season in the Pacific, so we're now gearing up for doing shifts there. So until we get fully staffed again, I'm going to have to do more forecasts. So I just hope I can keep with the rest of our great forecasters, because there's some really real intuitive men and women on our forecast that do great jobs.
What a great team. And somebody who might be there in the future is Alex Herbst. Alex, you're our special student analyst tonight. I know you've got a question for Dr. Landsea.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Chris about going back to the hurricane reanalysis. I know you talked about the 3 Category 5 storms, but what of the other ones, the Category 1 through 4, which one posed the most difficult challenge with reanalyzing it, and what was so challenging about it?
For Hurricane Camille, or which one are you discussing?
I'm talking about in terms of the other storms that were analyzed in the reanalysis project, which one was the most challenging for you?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not sure if I could pinpoint one precisely. There's been a number that have been very challenging. I think probably in general the most challenging one have been the ones in the late 40s and early 50s, because it was at the infancy of the aircraft reconnaissance era, and the hurricane hunters often didn't even fly into the center of the storm. If they encountered a hurricane and they paint the eye of the storm with their nose radar, often they would just circumnavigate the hurricane rather than to penetrate it, go into the eye of the storm. And so many times we're with the dilemma, well, it says 120 miles per hour, but they didn't go into the eye or the eye wall, so how strong is it? So that late 40s and early 50s proved to be very problematic, just because it was so fragmentary on the data they had. We had a really tremendously bright and talented student through Hagen, in Miami, working on that era. He's now at Impact Weather down in Houston, and he did an incredible job in sorting through all that and to make as much sense as we could. Currently, the database is officially available through 1950 with revisions, and I'm the 5 block of 5 seasons done, probably September season of 2014.
And by the way, let me just jump in here and say, for those people that are watching or listening live, we're having some bandwidth problems. All this is coming from Bill's point. And I know that it's very hard to hear Dr. Landsea, but I do believe that Bill is recording the audio, so we'll hopefully we'll be able to stitch this together during the audio podcast version. So we apologize for that. And Bill, I'll let you pick it back up. And again, if we have trouble hearing you guys, then we'll just go to Professor Peters, and we'll just kind of finishing up with the recording. But Bill, keep trying. We'll try it one more time.
All right. Chris, one question that came to us from Bill Reed was, talk about the role of drones in the process now. How do you see that affecting things as we go forward?
In the last 2 hurricanes, and also in 2014, NASA and NOAA are
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not able to understand Chris and Bill. I think it's a bandwidth issue. So what we're going to do, we'll let Bill go ahead and just record the rest of the audio interview with Chris, and we will stitch that together magically in the audio podcast version. But let's take a quick break. We'll have Professor Peters. We have a lot of business to take care of. We've got email, we got picks of the week, we got the weather roundup, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
There is not a lot written about horseshoe vortices, but they probably rank among one of the rarest forms of clouds according to the Cloud Appreciation Society. Some clouds are undeniably rarer than others, which tends to make them seem a little more special. In over 2,200 images in their cloud photo gallery, the Cloud Appreciation Society two that feature this rarely observed phenomenon. The horseshoe vortex cloud forms in a region of rotating air, or vortex, where there is enough low-level moisture for clouds to form. Such vortices usually form vertically, sometimes leading to waterspouts or even tornadoes, but occasionally they can develop with a horizontal axis and give rise to a gently rotating crescent of a cloud. Such a movement of air seems to happen when an updraft is upon reaching shearing horizontal winds. Rarely are conditions right for a cloud to appear within the spin. Areas east of a mountain range may be the best locations for observing a horseshoe vortex, where there is strong vertical shear without much directional shear. There is some conjecture that a horizontal roll intersects an updraft, which then pushes upward on the rotation to create the horseshoe shape to the cloud. Now, some say that a horseshoe brings luck only when it is pointing upwards and holding the luck in. Others claim that when pointing down, it allows luck to fall onto those below. Horseshoe vortex clouds tend to point downwards, and so any cloud watchers already fortunate enough to see one will want to stand below for the luck it may bestow on you. Just another fascinating part of the amazing atmosphere surrounding our planet. If you have a weather question, drop an email to question@weatherbrains.com.
I've actually got some weather questions for Rick Smith. Rick, are you ready for them?
Sure.
Number one, yeah, Nate has some suggested questions. Number one, what were you thinking when you accepted the invitation to be on this show? And does your wife know? But we'll pass on those and go. Tomorrow, tomorrow's a big anniversary day for you. What special things are happening to commemorate the Moore tornado?
Well, obviously there's a lot of interest here in the community. All the local stations obviously been doing a lot. Today was an anniversary too, May 19th. Kind of got overlooked in all the attention that May 20th got, but there was an EF4 tornado that killed 2 people just east of Oklahoma City here last May 19th, and we also had an EF3 that developed just on the east side of the Oklahoma City metro and moved up to the northeast. So those were big days. That was a big day in itself. Tomorrow is, of course, the anniversary of the Newcastle, Oklahoma City Moore tornado, the EF5, where we had 24 fatalities. Tomorrow, one of the main thing we're going to be involved in is a big commemoration ceremony that's going to be going on. It's a joint venture between the people at Moore Medical Center, the hospital that was destroyed, and the city of Moore. Governor Fallon's going to be there, lots of dignitaries, and it's going to be a combination of a groundbreaking for the new hospital that's going to be built right on the same site where the other one was destroyed, and also a ceremony to commemorate, to remember everything, probably everything for the whole city of Moore, not just the hospital, but the schools, the first responders, and even the meteorologists that were involved in the event.
What have you learned, Rick, looking back on that day? You've had a year to review the warning process, how people reacted, what went right, what went wrong. What were some of the highlights, and what were some of the things that need to be improved on with the warning process that day?
That you would think I would know the answer to that question by now, because that's been the most popular question I've been asked over the past few months. But that's really the toughest one. I mean, we obviously the warning, from a warning perspective, from the whole integrated warning system perspective, the media, the weather service, the emergency management, local community, it went pretty well. We had a 16-minute lead time before the tornado ever developed. 98% of the people in the tornado path had more than 31 minutes of warning. but yet we still had 24 fatalities. So, you know, one fatality is too much. So one of the things we're looking at now is what did people exactly do? We're trying to do some research and get down into the house-by-house level and figure out what did people in these EF4 and EF5 houses do? Did they get in their car and drive away? Did they take cover in an underground shelter? Did they go to a neighbor's? We're really learning that, you know, shelters play a huge role in this, and one of the things that's really standing out to me as I research this is the importance of having neighbors, having friends, and getting to know your neighbors. I don't know how many people, dozens, maybe hundreds of people, are here today probably because they have friends and neighbors who have shelters. You know, 15 people cramming into an 8-person shelter. There's lots of those stories. I think we've got a lot to learn about the social, societal response part of this, how people responded to the warnings. There's obviously the thing that comes up with the lots of lead time. You know, is there such thing as too much lead time? Is 31 minutes too much time? And obviously we're looking at, there's a lot of attention here in the local community about schools. What do schools do? Not every school has a shelter. Some schools are talking about closing. Thankfully, and knock on fake wood here, we're going to get through this school year and not have to deal with any of that. We've had a very, very slow, severe weather season. But, you know, it's a wide variety of things that are going on. But I think the main thing that we've learned is people do pay attention when we say things, and people, a lot of people do get the nuances of those messages where we're really trying to shake them harder and say, hey, this is different today. Some people are able to pick up on that, and so there's a lot of things that we're working on. Nothing really earth-shattering that's, you know, groundbreaking as far as something new that we learned, but a lot of the same things that we've been working on for a while.
And one more question. On the 24 deaths, Rick, have you been able to ascertain, were these people mostly in vehicles, in site-built homes, in mobile homes? Do you know the exact location of those that died?
We have been able to break that down, and this is one of the unusual tornado events I've ever been involved in, is that there was not a single mobile home fatality, not a single vehicle fatality in this tornado. All the fatalities were either in schools, homes, or businesses. We had, of course, 7 children that died at Plaza Tower Elementary. That was a tragic situation. We had 4 people that died in businesses, and then basically the rest of the fatalities happened people in their homes. You know, we don't know the exact circumstances of all those people. We know that they were all taking shelter above ground somewhere in their home, but we don't know all the details of that. But a very unusual tornado from that perspective.
That is odd. And how does this affect those you work with at the National Weather Service? You know, in our deal here in 2011, it very, very personally affected a lot of people in the weather business. How did it affect those that work with you at the Weather Service there in Norman?
It affected us, and it still affects us. We constantly say that it feels like last May never ended. It's kept going because that's all we've talked about and worked on and looked back on and looked forward to this year for. But you know, that the combination of all those events, the May 19th and then May 20th, and then 11 days later having all the events that happened around the May 31st tornado, the fatalities, all the other things that went on, it took a toll on us. And there were people here that, you know, for the first time ever, we actually brought in some counselors here to talk to some of the staff. That was kind of the advice of part of the advice of Jim Stefkovich there in Birmingham, our good friend, and they had done something similar after the April 27th, 2011 outbreak, and we'll do it again. I mean, I think it helped. I think as forecasters, you know, people don't think of meteorologists as being frontline first responders. We're not out there digging through the rubble, but as you know, everybody on here knows, your job is to come to work every day and put information out to keep this kind of thing from happening. So when it happens, it takes a toll on you. And I think the schools and the things that happened at the schools hit the hardest, and still to this day, that's very tough. There's people here in the office in the building who still can't. I have a hard time watching some of the video and footage of that day still. But anyway, we're getting better. It's the whole community here, and that's another thing too. All of this stuff happened just a few miles up the road from the office, and lots of us have friends and family who were impacted. So it was a personal event, not just blobs of storms on a radar.
I think a lot of people tend to forget that people in the weather enterprise, we're human beings. We have families. Most of us have children. Most of us are affected by these things in a very personal way, sometimes extremely personal. And I think what helped me out over the years, it's been those long car rides with my colleagues, like a Jim Stefkovich with the Weather Service, or somebody like a Brian Peters, or those that we work with on a daily basis, just to kind of share feelings, because there's really no outlet for us to vent or to share feelings. And sometimes, again, you have night terrors. I mean, it is a horrifying thing. It is a thing of violence we go through, and it's something that affects us all. But again, what you guys did, Rick, was exemplary. And I think for me, the May 20th event, and really May 31st, it was a case study in how to communicate weather so effectively across so many different platforms. The graphics that you prepared, the stuff you put out on social media, the interaction with people. I thought it was just an exemplary, example of how that we ought to be doing this. But yet, as good as it looked, and as good as we think we all did, you had 24 people that died. So a lot of that falls back on social science. But that's a whole other subject for a different day. But since we got to move along here, let's talk about what's happening right now.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
May 19th is the date, 2014, and we are making the transformation from the core of the tornado season for a lot of us into the long, hot summer months and the beginning of the hurricane season, which is not that far out there. So pretty quiet. Looks like in terms of what's happening weather-wise, maybe the wildfire danger. Rick, out in the western part of your state, that looks pretty nasty right now.
That's been the story, and we were so grateful and so thankful for no storms and no severe weather. But if we don't get storms and severe weather here in this part of the country this time of year, then we're in bad shape for summer, because this is where we get the bulk of the rainfall, and it's just not happening. So we've had already a busy wildfire season, and I'm honestly not looking forward to summer. I think it's just going to be pretty miserable around here.
In some spots, I think in New Mexico and West Texas, with dew points in the single digits and relative humidity, and actually in some places below zero, relative humidities below 5% behind the dry line, that is not a good combination.
No, nasty stuff. And I do the weather in Arizona, and they got a problem there too, although they're going to have some cooler temperatures and maybe a little rain late in the week. But again, out there, they just don't get that much. But that's one big problem. But other than that, looks like no major severe weather issues. There could be a few little pockets the middle part of this week. This show is going to the dogs. Somebody is barking up the wrong tree. Aubrey, is that your dog in the edit booth in there?
It is not. I do not have a dog.
Hey, look who just joined us. The internationally beloved meteorologist is here.
Good evening.
Wow. So we have two WCMs on this show.
No, you only have one. Rick Smith.
Oh, come on. Once a WCM, always a WCM.
Well, that's true.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that's probably true.
Yeah, so we had Brian at the NWA local meeting here in our market. But anyway, we're doing national weather. So, Nate, what's anything up your way on the East Coast? Looks pretty quiet.
No, we had a nice, comfortable open window weather weekend here across the Carolinas into Virginia and across much of the Southeast. Wasn't too bad with the humidity levels not too high, but we're starting to see those creep up today. They'll be up higher tomorrow, and we have a couple of days of taste of summer across the eastern part of the country as this area of high pressure centered across, we'll call it, northeast Ohio, starting to slide off toward the east. We'll get into that southeasterly flow. That'll crank the heat up a little bit for us, crank the humidity up here across the eastern part of the U.S. Then we get another break toward the end of the week. Memorial Day weekend looking pretty nice. And then As we look toward next week, was looking at the North American ensemble forecast system, sort of the mean upper level flow, and we're really shifting into more summer pattern with the upper level winds really retreating back toward Canada to allow that heat to build across the U.S. So the unofficial start of summer will feel like the official start of summer around much of the U.S.
The Death Ridge.
No!
So Alex, where you are? I'm sorry, you're located? Where in? I'm
actually in New Jersey right now. I was up in New Hampshire last week.
Okay, so you're in Jersey. So what's the weather like where you are?
Right now, it's definitely that window open kind of night where we just had a couple rain showers pass through here, central New Jersey, and now it's a little bit cooler out, and definitely the weather where you want to open up the window, crawl under a blanket, and catch a couple hours of sleep. But the big story up north last weekend was the rain that came through right around the time that Plymouth State was graduating. So it was a big story for much of New England whether or not people would be able to have their graduations inside or outside, and a lot of them had to move inside because of the rain, but ended up being a very nice weekend afterwards for everybody up there.
And by the way, remind us to grill you about college and advice for young people and all kind of things like that, because people all the time are asking us, and we actually have a young person that can give us some advice who's in the midst of all this stuff here. All right, I think we've got some email business to take care of, so let's check that good old email inbox.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
By the way, does it make us old, James, if we remember where that jingle originally played and remember watching it live on television?
I can't believe you're old enough. You're not old enough to remember that. It was Brian is.
Thank you.
If I had hair, it'd be gray. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's Perry Como show, isn't it? Is that right?
I don't know if I remember a Letterman used to play that on his show.
I think it actually originated with the Perry Como back in before my time.
Mm-hmm.
He had a live television show in the 50s, and Letterman took it and used it. I've heard it on some radio stations, but whatever. It goes back a long way. But Aubrey, I'm sorry. The floor now belongs to you. Take it and run.
It works. You know, my father would be very proud because he's a mailman, so I think he would be proud that I'm reading.
Nice.
The first
my
one.
father's a mailman.
Let's see. This one comes in from John Brusa. He listened to the show for the first time last week. Loved it. And we'll be sure to listen every week from here on out. He is 14 and a freshman in high school living in snowy Syracuse. So he's familiar with some of the snowy weather. A couple of topic suggestions. WeatherRate, a company named WeatherRate, comes around to local TV stations in each market and picks out one to be certified as most accurate.
Hey, has anybody had any dealings with these people before? Or is it in anybody's market here, WeatherRate?
Not directly. I know the station in Charlotte has some deal. One of the stations in Charlotte has some dealings with them.
Station here in the Oklahoma City market is affiliated with them.
Because I, from time to time, will get this little email from these guys. You, perhaps, are the most accurate weather in your market. And if you send us some money, then you can use this on the air in your promotion. But they wouldn't give any clues as to their methodology. And that, to me, that's the... You know, I'm doing weather updates all day. I mean, some of it's on television, most of it is not. So
yeah.
What is
They're pulling? It's my understanding that they pull forecasts. They'll identify where your 7-day forecast is on your website and determine when it's updated, and then they'll grab that and plug those numbers into a spreadsheet that does some magic calculations to determine who is the most accurate in a given market. And then,
here's the next problem. Where's your verification point? Are you trying to verify at the airport where nobody lives? Or are you trying to verify in some of the suburbs or in the city? I mean, that's a very difficult metric to me.
I think they verify much like the Weather Service does, they verify where they get observations, which is probably going to be the airport in most cases.
At the airport, yeah. And where we are.
But I think the fact that we're having this conversation makes it worth having one of their folks on to talk about it. I mean, kind of an interesting thing, if nothing else.
I think we should do that, Aubrey. It's a good suggestion.
It's an interesting topic. Thank you, John. Second, he would be interested in hearing about the technology that broadcast meteorologists use, which actually we talked about last week.
The broadcast bonanza.
Yes.
Broadcast meteorology bonanza.
So that is definitely a good topic as well. This article came into us from Victor, and I've seen numerous articles of these. I'm sure you guys have too. This was supposedly posted in the AP from November 2nd, 1922, claiming that the Arctic Ocean is getting warmer, the seals are vanishing, and the icebergs are melting. So you can go back in history and find numerous articles. It's cooling, it's warming, it's cooling, it's warming. We're all going to die.
You mean the climate changes?
We're still here. We're still here. You guys know that? We're still here.
Wait, we're all still here?
We are still here.
You know, I was going to ask Dr. Landsea to get into this, but I just, you know, I buzz people on both sides of this argument. And for those that are new, the reason we blow that buzzer whenever this comes up, that is such a politicized, polarizing subject. It brings out hate and rage and anger, and I just don't like that. You're not going to change anybody's mind on this show, so we just kind of buzz it away and move on to something else. So.
Agreed. Moving on. This one comes in from Weather USA Support. Thanks for making a great show. They've been watching for close to a year now. And they also have an app. Their company, Weather USA LLC, they have a free weather app for Android devices now available on the Google Play Store, some Polygon-based weather alerts. More information, you can search for them, weatherusa.net. If you would like to try out the app, we can also maybe try out the app. This is from Wesley Haynes, who is the meteorologist and developer, and also David Decker from the meteorologist and developer. They would appreciate some of the feedback because they've also taken into account some of the suggestions that we've made on WeatherBrains about using NDFD data. So anybody willing to try out that app is appreciated. So
and I think I remember reading that one was Android only right now, but iOS is coming.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to send them. We're going to send them an invoice for that free ad too.
Yeah.
So
free copies.
If you have an email guest suggestion that you would like to send to us, send us an email at email@weatherbrains.com. Tell us what you like about the show, what you don't like about the show, or any future guest suggestions, and also some topics that you would like to hear. You can also go to weatherbrains.com, fill out a listener survey, and let us know how long you listened to the show and how long maybe you've been watching the show or listening to the show for. You can also search for us on the Facebook and the Twitter. You can search for WeatherBrains, or you can find us all on there. Find your favorite podcast host, or find us all on there individually.
And if you hate the show, it's Brian Peters at brianpeters.com. That's the email to use. Thank you. It's time now to find out what's happening in weather news with our pal Nate.
The Washington Monument is open again. You remember we had that big 5+ magnitude earthquake in 2011, and the Washington Monument suffered some pretty severe damage. Now, the earthquake was in north central Virginia, but we had enough shock across portions of the D.C. area that we had a lot of damage to the National Cathedral, as well as the Washington Monument. And it was actually up there last August, and the monument was still had the scaffolding up and everything else. The National Cathedral, you could go in, but you couldn't see the ceiling because they still had pieces of stonework dropping, a little bitty pieces, but enough that you wouldn't want it to be falling in your eye or anything else. Anyway, Washington Monument opened again last week. The elevator broke twice during the first day. Yeah, so you take the elevator up to the top, and then you get stuck. And it's something like 900 stairs going up and down. I wouldn't mind going down 900 stairs, but I'm not going up 900 stairs, not even for that view. But anyway, if you are interested in checking out the Washington Monument, it is free, but you need a ticket. You have to get a ticket in advance from the National Park Service before they will let you in. You can go to the National Park Service website, just Google it, and you can get in. Really good stuff, though. If you are traveling to D.C., you should definitely check that out. Speaking of things in D.C., the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, a.k.a. NOAA, a.k.a. Brian Peters' former employer, a.k.a. Rick Smith's current employer, now has a chief scientist, Richard Spinrad. He's formerly vice president of research for Oregon State. He is no stranger to the federal service. Prior to joining Oregon State, he was working as the head of the National Ocean Service. Taking over will be the chief scientist, will direct the scientific policy for NOAA and work underneath Dr. Catherine Sullivan. Finally, Sprite. It's not just a soda anymore. It's
never been just a soda.
I've never been just a soda, that's right. Little bits of electricity shooting out of the tops of thunderstorms. This is cool
it's also
stuff.
a car.
It's a car. Well, that's true.
I had one.
You really?
Yes.
Let's take this thing completely off the rails. Describe your Sprite to us.
Yeah, we're going down a rat hole here. Go ahead, Brian. What kind of car is this?
It was a 1967 and a half Austin Healey Sprite. It was British Racing Green, and I have a number of racing trophies to show why I went through a set of tires in a year.
Nice. So when are we going to see it on cars? When is it going to compete with Lightning McQueen?
I don't know. No idea.
Just so long as you don't start singing Frozen, we'll be all right. So Sprites, these are great bits of electricity shooting out of the tops of thunderstorms. A research paper published in Nature Communication, a couple of Penn State researchers trying to model them and understand what it is that causes them. It's a disturbance that can actually affect the ionosphere. This is important stuff to figure out because disturbances in the ionosphere can disrupt communications here on Earth and between the Earth and our satellites and everything else. So trying to get behind or get underneath that little meteorological mystery there. If you have news items, love to talk about them here on WeatherBrains. Send them to us, email at weatherbrains.com, or you can find me on Twitter. I am at NSJ. I'm also plus Nate Johnson on Google Plus for the 5 of you that are over there.
There you go. So Alex, you had a question for Rick, I see. I'm sorry, I didn't see that note until just now.
Oh, that's okay. I was going to ask Rick about, he was talking about the societal impacts of it and the impacts that the National Weather Service officers had with the Moore tornado. And I know I just completed a little bit of research about the tornado in one of my classes at Plymouth State. And I wanted to ask you, Rick, about how things are going to go going forward with people in the National Weather Service and how people in the meteorology field have become more of those first responder types, in that we've become so much more on the front lines of disasters in this country, and how you think that's going to change in the future.
Well, that's a great question. We are getting much more into that role. The different offices provide on-site decision support for things. I mean, we dispatched a meteorologist to the incident command post early the morning after the Moore tornado, and were there for nearly 5 days after that. So we were kind of sitting there in the incident command post with the various agencies that were there. I think it's going to, there's all kinds of things associated with that. There's more training as far as for a meteorologist to be able to go into that environment. I mean, we're not used to that. We're geeky, introverted scientists that like to sit in front of our computers, a lot of us, and going out and interacting with firemen and highway patrolmen and National Guardsmen is something that's not really that, not everybody's comfortable doing that. So we're feeling our way through that, and then I think that the emotional part of it is continue to be a part of it. I mean, whether we are in an incident command post as, working with the responders, or whether we're doing a damage survey. I mean, Brian can attest to this, and maybe others too. I mean, your goal is to get out there and see the damage when it's as fresh as possible. Well, you're going to see things besides damage that you don't want to see and that you're going to never forget, and all of those things together, I think the bottom line is just getting more in touch with, like James said earlier, we're people, we're not robots, we're not just purely scientists. I mean, we're people, we live here, we have feelings and families and all that, and we just need to account for that. And so I don't know if that answered your question, Alex, or not. I hope so.
Definitely helped with it. Thanks, Rick.
Okay.
All right, thanks, guys. Time now for Picks of the Week. We're going to go around the horn. Everybody's going to share something weather-related. This can be a website, hardware, software, weather instruments, books. And I will start. It is a very interesting post concerning the warnings of a monster super El Nino coming to you this year. And I'll give the hat tip to Panovich on this.
We need to play the video clip of Chris Farley being El Nino. That would be like the El Nino buzzer.
I used that clip in a Sweet Piece a couple years ago.
Yeah, that's funny stuff. But just the summary says, today we have an example of America's poor ability to process information. Weather reports have become climate porn. Run for your lives, and El Nino comes. In fact, an El Nino appears likely in 2014-15, perhaps one with substantial effects, but exaggerated warnings, often false, don't help. Instead, they dull our ability to assess and respond to danger. This article describes the situation with tips about distinguishing reliable sources from the noise. And I've already seen so much lunacy on this, it's crazy. So anyway, that's my pick. So let's go over to Aubrey and see. I know she has a pick of the week. She always does because she is prepared.
I'm always prepared. Yes, my pick is from space.com, and it is about the new possible, well, it is about the new meteor shower that may or may not be extravagant, or it could be a complete dud. So take it or leave it, but I think meteor showers are pretty cool. They're not very, new ones are not very common. So we'll see next week, morning of the 24th, I believe.
Friday night, Saturday morning.
Look north in a dark sky. We'll see if we can see 5,000 meteors an hour or something like that.
Yeah, we're not going to see
that. I'm a big meteor shower fan. You know, I work these. Yeah, I work these weird. We all work weird hours.
We're all meteorologists, right? Doesn't that mean we study meteors?
That's exactly what we study.
That's all we study. But I know when I go home, you know, at midnight or whatever, walk outside, just sit up there. The only thing, it hurts my neck after a while. So
that's why you get a blanket and lay down.
Exactly. So let's see if Brian Peters has one for us. Brian?
No, I don't.
I know. What? I just gave you one. There's one in the chat. There's one in the chat, Brian Peters. Take it.
I've been busy. No, That's all right. Maybe I'll use that next week. I got the foghorn. I love the sound of that horn.
Go be a hockey fan or something.
No, Nate's suggestion is really a good pick. That's a great article that Brad wrote. But
yes, it is.
You can pick it next week. All right. Okay. So Rick, this is your first official pick of the week as a regular on this show. So what you got?
Well, I'm going to go, since I've been talking about the emotional side of severe weather and forecasting. I've got a pick that somebody on Twitter suggested that I do, so I'm going to take him up on it. This has to do with the May 20th tornado last year. It has to do with the Oklahoma City Thunder, who I'm trying to keep an eye on off to the side of the screen here, how they're doing against the Spurs. I don't think it's going very well. But ESPN did a story yesterday. It aired in the morning, I think, on Outside the Lines, and it's available online too. There's a Briarwood Elementary that was hit by the EF5 tornado last year. Obviously, there were lots of kids trapped, heroic actions by the teachers. So they got Kevin Durant from the Thunder to narrate a special piece about an iconic picture from that event. And you've seen the picture before. It's the big dog, little dog. It's the big guy hugging the little kid that just came out of the debris from the school who was buried in there. And it's a good story. And you probably will, need some Kleenex, or the room may get a little dusty as you watch it. But it's a great story. We had a wonderful opportunity to host that young boy and his whole second grade class. We invited him out to the Weather Center several weeks ago to give them a tour. Lots of them obviously have been impacted big time by their experience in the tornado. So I don't know. It was a very cool story. It was even cooler that I got to meet the little boy that was in there, and it's on the edges of related to weather, but I think everybody should watch it.
Yeah, I might tear up. I'm going through male menopause, so I cry more now than I've ever cried in my whole life. And again, Rick, you might want to open up the chat on the Hangout here, because Brian is asking for that link for the website. All the pics will be up on the website, weatherbrains.com. Let's see here. Alex, got a pick for us this week?
My pick for you this week, probably have to go back to my school at Plymouth State with our Vortex website, where we've got a bunch of cool tools that we use in all of our classes, being able to look at any upper air analyses. We put all of our broadcasts that I did this semester, along with a bunch of other of our grad students and a couple of graduating seniors. We put them up on our TV page for everyone to see, because those ones actually make it to air a lot easier than the ones on public access. But it's a really cool page to check out, and it's a great program for all of our students to be a part of.
I think everybody gives that one a thumbs up. Plymouth State, it's good. So Nate giving a thumbs up.
Whenever I need a visibility map, that's where I go, because nobody generates those. I have to make it on my own, but you can do that there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can make your own maps. It's good stuff. All right, Nate, what's your pick this week?
Well, with the anniversaries this week, next week of the tornadoes in Oklahoma, I wanted to share actually a topic of a WeatherBrains we did a few months ago. The Disaster Distress Helpline. Free, confidential, you don't have to give your name or anything like that, but if you're just, if the events of last year, this week or next week are just weighing on you too heavy, give them a call.
Cool. And again, we'll have the information up on weatherbrains.com. All right, we got a few minutes left here, so Alex, this is my personal grilling. Let's say that somebody's listening to the show.
I'm ready.
We just had a letter from a 14-year-old, an email from a 14-year-old that listens. But let's say, 16, 17-year-old, maybe they're finishing their junior year, they're about to start their senior year. They want to find a school that offers meteorology, atmospheric science. How did you go through that process, and how did you wind up where you are?
Well, it was an interesting process for me, because I ended up wanting to go to a small school. So that's where I really was able to focus myself down. I didn't want to go to a large school like Penn State. I wanted to stay on the East Coast, where my mother wouldn't really let me leave the East Coast. But I stayed with these smaller schools like Plymouth State, Linden State, Western Connecticut, and I look at each of their programs, and it depends on what your focus really wants to be. If you want to do private forecasting, if you want to do broadcasting, or if you just want an applied program. And I thought Plymouth had the best mix of everything that I wanted to be able to do, and I found my niche in broadcasting through them.
Okay, well, cool. So did you, when you started looking for schools, did you just go make campus visits? Did you start online? How did that process work?
I actually did everything entirely online. I never actually was able to visit any of the campuses that I wanted to go to, because of being able to stay at school and not being able to travel without my family. But I was able to do everything online and figure it out, and I did a lot of searching online to see what things looked like and where everything was. But I definitely encourage people to, if you get a chance to, definitely take a visit to the school, because you'll definitely get a free meal out of it, and then you'll also end up getting to see really where you'll be for the next 4 years of your life.
So the question is, where do you want to wind up in 5 years?
Where do I want to end up in 5 years? It's tough. I think I've got so many different directions I can go to at this point. I can go and get my master's. I can go and search for jobs right now in broadcasting, but I definitely love the broadcast route that I've taken.
Okay, cool. Well, great. Well, listen, I'm looking at the old clock on the wall here, and we've actually got to wrap this thing up, because I must walk across the hall and do some television. WeatherBrains is produced typically Monday nights at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. You can watch us live.bigbrainsmedia.com. We know that most of you listen. That's great as well. But our address is email@weatherbrains.com if you'd like to get in touch with us. All of our Twitter accounts and social media accounts, picks of the week, all that stuff is up in the show notes on weatherbrains.com, courtesy of the amazing Professor Peters, who is hard at work every week putting that show together. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great week, and God bless. Rick?
Yes.
Hope you come back, man.
I will be back. If you'll have me back, I'll be back.
Yes, we will.
You are in.
Thank you.
And Alex, thanks, man. You were great. And sorry we had some audio issues with Bill, but what Bill's doing when he goes away, he records audio that's clean, and he sends it to us, and we edit it back in the audio show, so nobody ever knows we have any problems. But thanks, guys. I got to go to some television. You'll have a great week.
All right, good show.
Thank
See you later. Good to have you on.